In the early hours of the 10th of May, 2019, a mother received the phone call that every parent dreads. The Louisiana State Police informed Mona Hardin that her 9-year-old son, Ronald Greene, had died in a tragic car accident. According to the official police narrative, Ronald crashed his vehicle into a tree following a high-speed pursuit, dying instantly on impact. It was a closed case, a simple, tragic accident. But Ronald Greene didn't die in a car crash. He was brutally tortured to death on the side of a dark, rural highway by the very men sworn to protect him. The undeniable proof was captured on body camera footage that high-ranking state officials deliberately hid from the public and from Ronald's family for over 2 years. In it, an officer literally boasts about beating the life out of a restrained, defenseless man. Today, we are going to dismantle one of the most sickening, highly coordinated police cover-ups in modern American history, revealing exactly how top-tier law enforcement officials altered medical reports, buried physical evidence, and allowed uniformed killers to comfortably hide behind the badge. The official story never made sense. When Mona Hardin went to see the vehicle her son had supposedly died in, she found a car with relatively minor front-end damage. The windshield was intact. The airbags hadn't even deployed. How does a man suffer catastrophic fatal injuries in an accident so minor that the car's basic safety mechanisms aren't triggered? Even more disturbing were the autopsy photos. Ronald's face was bruised and battered, covered in deep parallel lacerations that looked nothing like the blunt force trauma associated with hitting a steering wheel. There were strange, identical puncture marks on his skin. Yet, the initial medical reports, heavily influenced by the narrative fed to the coroner by the police, noted the cause of death as a motor vehicle accident. The physical evidence was screaming a completely different story, but the bureaucratic machinery of the state was already working overtime to silence it. To understand the sheer magnitude of this systemic failure, we have to look at what actually happened in the pitch-black darkness of that Louisiana highway. At around midnight, troopers attempted to pull Ronald over for an unspecified traffic violation. Ronald, for reasons we will never fully know, did not stop. A pursuit ensued, reaching high speeds before Ronald's vehicle crashed into a wooded area near Monroe, Louisiana. This is where the police report ends and the horror begins. Ronald survived the crash completely uninjured. He did not fight. He did not have a weapon. As officers swarmed his vehicle, Ronald surrendered. The very first words out of his mouth as troopers dragged him from his car were, "I'm your brother. I'm scared. I'm scared." He was begging for his life. But empathy is not what he found in the dark that night. Master Trooper Chris Hollingsworth, Trooper Dakota DeMoss, and Deputy Corey York did not see a frightened citizen. They saw a target within seconds of pulling him from the vehicle. Without any active resistance from Ronald, the officers unleashed a torrent of violence. Ronald was repeatedly stunned with a taser, not once, but over and over again, as he lay on the ground, apologizing, pleading. The bizarre puncture marks found during his autopsy, those were from the taser prongs, deployed at point-blank range, but the torture was just beginning. Handcuffed and shackled by his ankles, effectively rendering him entirely immobile, Ronald was left face down in the dirt. Body camera footage. The state of Louisiana would spend millions in legal maneuvering to keep hidden shows. Deputy Corey York violently dragging Ronald by his ankle shackles. You can see Ronald's face grinding into the pavement. You can hear the sickening thud of a flashlight being used as a bludgeon against a restrained man's skull. For over 9 minutes, officers left him prone, face down, struggling to breathe, with his hands and feet bound together. When Ronald finally went motionless, the officers didn't rush to render aid. They didn't frantically call for a paramedic to save the man they had just pulverized. Instead, the audio captures Master Trooper Hollingsworth returning to his cruiser, picking up his radio, and calmly making a statement that should have instantly resulted in a murder charge. He casually tells a colleague, "I beat the ever-living fuck out of him. He was spitting blood everywhere." And then all of a sudden he just went limp. He didn't mention a car crash. He didn't mention a medical emergency. He confessed to a fatal beating. And this is where we reach the most infuriating part of this case. The violence on that highway was horrific, but the violence that followed, the violence committed by the system in air-conditioned offices by men in expensive suits, is what makes this a tragedy of epic proportions. When a man is beaten to death in handcuffs, the system is supposed to purge the officers responsible. But the Louisiana State Police didn't purge them. They protected them. For 474 days, state officials refused to release the body camera footage. The initial crash report filed by the officers entirely omitted any mention of a physical struggle, the use of force, or the dragging. It was a sanitized, fictionalized document designed to legally erase a homicide, and the rot went all the way to the top. The medical examiner who conducted Ronald's autopsy was never provided with the body camera footage or the accurate police reports. He was actively kept in the dark by investigators. How can a medical examiner accurately determine a cause of death when the state police deliberately withhold the evidence showing a man being bludgeoned and suffocated? They couldn't, and that was exactly the point. The police engineered an inconclusive autopsy to provide legal cover for a lynching. When the family relentlessly pushed back, demanding the footage, the stonewalling became institutional. High-ranking officials within the Louisiana State Police, including the superintendent, were made aware of the video. They saw exactly what you and I know happened. Yet, they allowed Trooper DeMoss and Deputy York to remain on active duty. They allowed the narrative of a car crash to stand. They closed ranks, reinforcing the blue wall of silence. It took a leak, a brave whistleblower, risking their career to hand the footage over to the Associated Press 2 years later for the world to finally see the truth. The public release of the video forced the state's hand. But even then, the justice system fought tooth and nail to protect its own. Master Trooper Hollingsworth, the man who boasted about the beating, learned he was going to be fired in September 2020. Hours after receiving the news, he died in a single-car crash, a highly suspicious incident that many believe was a suicide to ensure his family received his pension. He never faced a judge. He never looked Mona Hardin in the eye. The other officers involved were allowed to quietly resign or face minor administrative slaps on the wrist for years, while prosecutors dragged their feet, claiming the case was complex. There is nothing complex about a group of armed men suffocating a handcuffed citizen. The only complexity was figuring out how to let them get away with it. Ronald Greene was treated as less than human, both in the final agonizing moments of his life and in the years that followed, by a justice system that views police accountability as an inconvenience. His case proves that a badge does not just grant the authority to enforce the law. In the right jurisdiction, it grants the power to rewrite reality. It allows officers to murder a man, write car crash on a piece of paper, and expect the entire machinery of the government to back them up. If you think the Louisiana State Police burying a murder on a dark highway is the most terrifying abuse of authority you've ever seen, wait until you hear about a precinct that turned a blind eye to a serial killer because the victims lived on the wrong side of town. Click the video on your screen to see the case the department desperately tried to sweep under the rug.